Carla Jan Walker. On January 31, 1957, Carla Jan Walker was born in Fort Worth, Texas. On February 16, 1974, she was abducted from her boyfriend's passenger seat while she was a 17-year-old cheerleader and student. After attending a Valentine's Dance Week at Western Hills High School, Carla and her boyfriend, Rodney McCoy, were waiting for friends in his car in the Brunswick Ridgely Bowl parking lot when all of a sudden, the car door swung open, and the two were attacked and assaulted by an unidentified individual who had dropped the magazine from his gun during the attack. McCoy was struck by the back of a pistol and rendered unconscious while attempting to repel the assailant. Later, when he awoke, he found Carla gone. The last thing he remembered seeing her say was, "Rodney, go get my dad." Thereafter, McCoy went to Carla's parents' house to inform them of what had happened. They contacted the police, who conducted a search of the area where she was taken hostage. The only things found in the parking lot were her purse and the magazine clip the attacker had left behind. On February 20, 1974, a few days later, Carla's body was discovered in a drainage tunnel at Benbrook Lake. She had been alive for 2 days following her kidnapping, and the results of the autopsy revealed that she had also been beaten, raped, given a morphine injection, tortured, and strangled to death. It was said that during the initial stages of the investigation, the police had a long list of potential suspects. Glenn Samuel McCurley was one of the men questioned soon after Carla was killed in 1974 because he was connected to the pistol magazine discovered in the bowling alley parking lot. It appears that he had just bought a handgun that took the identical magazine that was discovered at the scene of the crime. Before we continue, we want to remind you that only a small percentage of people who watch our videos are actually subscribed. So if you enjoy our content, consider subscribing. It's free. Now, let's move on with the video. McCurley did, however, inform investigators that his gun had been taken from his truck. He was freed after completing and passing a polygraph exam. Nothing connected him to the murder at this stage. Semen and other bodily fluid evidence had been taken from the crime site by the police, who were in dire need of answers. Carla's clothing was also saved for future examination, but in the 1970s, there was no sophisticated technology available to identify the murderer. As a result, the murder case remained unsolved for 46 years until September 2020, when the police obtained DNA samples from the trash can outside McCurley's residence. The samples were verified to match the DNA evidence taken from the crime site in 1974, and when the investigators went back to McCurley's house, he invited them in for a conversation. He told the same narrative he had told the authorities in 1974. He asserted that he had never met Carla Jan Walker and denied ever having killed anyone. He then consented to provide a DNA sample when requested by the investigators and signed a consent form. They collected 2 chick swabs and sent them for analysis along with Carla's clothes. They were submitted to Othram Incorporated, a laboratory that specializes in cutting-edge analysis of damaged and tiny DNA fragments. In the end, they created a complete DNA profile of the offender. The samples taken from McCurley 6 days later matched the DNA discovered on Carla's bra. This was sufficient to warrant McCurley's arrest and indictment of capital murder. August 2021 marked the beginning of McCurley's trial. The pistol he said was stolen in 1974 was among the evidence shown in court. Inside his house, the weapon was discovered carefully hidden. McCurley entered a guilty plea on the 3rd day of his trial and was given a life sentence. He is presently incarcerated at the Gibb Lewis unit and is scheduled to be released on parole on March 21, 2029. He continues to insist on his innocence as of the time this video was made. Once, he told a reporter that he had had enough of being harassed and had entered a guilty plea. Jim Walker, Carla's younger brother, is relieved that his sister's horrific murder has a face at last and that the family finally has one. Jim claimed their parents had both passed away before witnessing the murderer, but he was able to keep the promise he made to his mother. Jim became a police officer about 45 years ago after his sister was killed. Moving on to the next case. Denise O'Neal. Denise O'Neal was a 28-year-old Florida resident who lived in Palm Beach. She was a travel enthusiast and an explorer. She enjoyed recreational activities including swimming and scuba diving, as well as visiting museums. Denise was born and raised in New Jersey or San Diego, but when she was 4 years old, her family moved to Dublin, Ireland, where they lived for 2 years before coming back to the U.S. to start first grade. Denise, the eldest of her 3 sisters, was the first person in her family to enroll in college. In 1989, she received her honors degree from the University of San Diego. After earning her master's degree from Boston College, she moved to Brookings, Oregon, where her family owned a riverfront restaurant. She developed a love for teaching there and started volunteering at a local high school. She relocated to Palm Beach, Florida in 1992 to pursue her independence. Because of her inexperience, she was turned down for multiple teaching positions that she applied for. Denise was a server at Palm Beach's Charlie's Crab restaurant while she was looking for a teaching position. She was apparently happy with her life and earning a respectable wage at her profession. In the 2.5 years that she had worked there, her co-workers reported she was always on time and never missed a shift. After Denise skipped her shift for 2 days in a row, her manager called her home on July 15, 1995. The management called the police, fearing that something had happened to Denise, but no one answered. An investigation into missing persons was started right away by the police. When they went to her flat, they saw that it was orderly and spotless, with no obvious evidence of forced entry. But Denise's automobile was nowhere to be found in the parking lot. When police looked through her answering machine, they discovered a notice from her credit card company alerting her to a strange activity on her account. When detectives asked her neighbors, nobody mentioned hearing or seeing anything out of the ordinary. Later on, Denise's car was discovered by police in a parking lot across the street from her apartment. On the driver's side of the vehicle, cops found a cigarette butt and 2 Coke bottles inside. Denise's friends and family insisted fervently that she didn't smoke. Denise's pink jacket was also discovered by the police on the car's backseat. An examination of the car's forensics was mandated by detectives. Sand traces were found in the vehicle by crime scene technicians. Analysis showed that the sand was actually limestone, not the usual sand seen on beaches. Both outside and inside the car, many fingerprints were discovered by crime scene investigators. Police thought that someone other than Denise had driven the vehicle. Investigators discovered that at approximately 2:30 p.m. on July 13th, a pair of women's sneakers had been purchased using Denise's credit card. But Denise failed to come up for her shift, which was scheduled to start at 5:30 p.m. The police thought Denise would vanish within those 3 hours. Later that day, $700 was taken out of Denise's bank account, but police were unable to identify the actual cash taker because the ATM CCTV was down at the time. The inquiry would go on. Eventually, a worried bystander called the police to report finding a body in a nearby canal. Denise O'Neal was recognized as the deceased person. A dog leash, a shoelace, and a belt had tied her torso. After that, a big pink sheet was put around her and fastened with 2 electrical lines that had heat pebbles attached to them. An artificial rock that produces heat through the use of electricity is called a heat rock. It's frequently used to warm cold-blooded animals, like pet lizards or snakes. On this sheet, the police also discovered black dog hairs. According to police, Denise's killer had a dog and a lizard. Denise had been sexually raped and strangled to death, according to an autopsy. Given that the sand inside her automobile matched the sand at the canal where her body was eventually found, it seems likely that her killer utilized her car to transfer her body. Then, police investigated Denise's neighbors. One of the neighbors appeared in front of the media several times. He maintained, as he did with the police, that he didn't know Denise at all when making these remarks to the media. He went under the name Luis Caballero and lived next door to Denise. Luis's neighbors would soon tell detectives that he kept a boa constrictor snake and a chow dog as pets. When questioned, Luis denied having anything to do with Denise's death. Other than the occasional hello, he said he had never spoken to her. Luis had serious financial problems and was unemployed at the time. In addition to overdue rent, He owed over $6,000 in outstanding phone bills from using phone sex lines. When police examined Luis's residence, they discovered a number of clues that pointed to him as the murderer. Police used a search order to enter his house and discovered a sizable terrarium with a boa constrictor inside. They discovered his pet dog elsewhere in the house. The impressions at the bottom of the terrarium appeared to be consistent with the heated rocks. Additionally, they discovered a black shoe devoid of shoelaces. A black shoelace had been used to bind Denise. Crime scene investigators discovered blue fibers between the hinges of the scissors and bloodstains on the bedroom carpet. Denise had been wearing a blue top at the time. Even though the dog and the boa constrictor provided sufficient circumstantial evidence of Luis's culpability, Denise's gym membership card was the most damning piece of evidence that the detectives discovered. It was hidden beneath a box made of cardboard. Although Luis claimed that Denise had never entered his flat, authorities think that she was forcibly forced there after being abducted. Investigators determined that Denise understood her life was in danger while she was being held captive and left the gym membership card for them to find. When the police asked Luis if he had ever been inside Denise's automobile, he said that he had never been inside. Yet, the police discovered his fingerprints within the vehicle. Luis abruptly altered his account and said that his roommate and buddy, 19-year-old Isaac Brown, was the murderer and that he was an unintentional witness when the police showed him the incriminating evidence. But according to Isaac, Luis was the actual murderer. He claimed that Luis had been wanting to rob and kill Denise for a while and was in financial need. Denise's automobile also included eyes research. It was found that Denise's body was thrown at the canal by the two men who had murdered her. The two murderers then decided to share a dinner at the International House of Pancakes, a sit-down restaurant. Officers visited the eatery to interrogate staff members. They asserted that there were actually 3 clients there, not just 2 men. This implied that Denise's death was actually caused in part by a third man. Remarkably, neither Luis nor Isaac had ever brought up a third man. After reviewing Luis's prior criminal history, investigators discovered a man who had assisted Luis in stealing an automobile. The name of this accomplice was Robert Messer. It was then established that Denise's automobile had his fingerprints on the inside as well. When Robert was taken in for interrogation, he stated that he had simply assisted Luis and Isaac in disposing of Denise's body and that they were the ones who had killed her. Only Luis was linked to Denise's sexual assault by a DNA test. Denise was doing her laundry when Luis grabbed her and dragged her inside his flat, according to the police, who believe Luis plotted the attack. They think that after that, Luis and Isaac bound her and had her disclose them her ATM PIN. They believe that Luis left Denise and Isaac in the flat after stealing the ATM card and taking all the money he could. Detectives speculated that Denise managed to slip her gym membership card under the cardboard box while Luis was away. Not realizing that Denise had left a hint, Luis sexually raped Denise and strangled her to death on the way back after picking up Robert Messer. The callousness of the individuals who were able to toss Denise's body into a canal and then walk into an IHOP restaurant is noted by detectives. Charges against Luis Caballero included kidnapping, sexual assault, and Denise O'Neal's murder. He received a death sentence. After being found guilty of manslaughter, Robert Messer was given a 15-year prison term, although he was only released after serving just 5. After being found guilty on 5 charges, including second-degree murder, Isaac Brown was given a life sentence without the chance of release. Cancer claimed Luis Caballero's life in jail in 2013. Those closest to Denise remarked that she may have stopped countless more heinous events from occurring because of her bravery and fast thinking under pressure. Moving on to the next case. Fawn Cox. In Kansas City, Missouri, 16-year-old Fawn Cox resided with her parents and 2 younger sisters. Fawn was an outgoing and kind adolescent who liked to go camping and swimming. She helped her parents take care of her younger siblings and took an active part in church activities. Fawn, a junior at Northeast High School, worked as a cashier at Worlds of Fun, a theme park in Kansas City, and she had a boyfriend. Fawn had been working late at the theme park on July 26, 1989. She was picked up and brought home by her mother and sister at 11 o'clock when her shift ended. She stated she was exhausted and had to go to work the next day, so she went straight to bed. Usually, Fawn's younger sisters, Felisa and Amber, would sleep upstairs with her in the adjoining room. But since there was no working air conditioning on the upper floor and it being a hot summer night, Felisa decided to sleep downstairs while Amber went out to watch the kids. Fawn was left to sleep alone herself on the house's upper level as a result. Fawn's alarm clock went off the next morning at 9:30 a.m. in an attempt to get her to wake up for work. But when Fawn failed to turn off the alarm clock, her sister Felisa and mother Beverly went upstairs to look into it. When they went into her room, they saw something horrifying. Laying lifeless in her bed was Fawn. The family called the police right away. After examining the crime scene, detectives deduced that the murderer had entered the house through an open window on the upstairs, perhaps by scaling a trailer that had been parked there. The trailer was always parked there since her father used it for work. Once in her bedroom, the murderer attacked her sexually and used a nightgown that had been taken from Amber and Felisa's room to strangle her. Fawn's family reported to the police that evening they had heard nothing. Any noise from upstairs had been drowned out by their noisy air conditioner. Felisa said to the police that their family dog was barking and behaving anxious between the hours of 12 and 2 in the morning, but she thought this was because the dog was expecting. A stereo recorder, a Nintendo game console, and 2 radios were among the several items from the residence that went stolen, according to a post made by Fawn's sister, Amber Cox, on websleuth.com. Additionally, Amber stated that some items had been moved out of the closets in the room next door, which raised the possibility that the criminal had been hiding there. Police suspect that the killer or killers knew the family and were familiar with the layout of the property since they broke into the house while Fawn's father was sleeping and her mother and sister were out picking her up from work. Blood and semen samples were among the several pieces of evidence that the police gathered from the crime site. After questioning friends, family, and neighbors, detectives began an inquiry, but nothing noteworthy came of it. Before long, a witness identified the 3 teens as members of the 9th Street Dog Gang and located them at the crime scene. But afterwards, the witness renounced their testimony for unclear reasons. That being said, the men who were recognized as Christopher A. Yates, Leonard C. Crucis, Timothy E. Roberts, and asked them questions. Unknown to the other males, one of the suspects admitted to spending the evening at Fawn's house and stole a few things. Additionally, he reported to the police that a record player's handle broke whilst passing it around and removing it from the house. He said to the police that he had concealed the handle outside the home under a shrub. He would later retract his claims, but oddly, the handle was discovered by the police in the same location. It has been reported that the Nintendo was taken from the house by one of the suspects. His family identified the Nintendo he was attempting to sell them after reading about it in the news as something that had been taken from Fawn's home. After the family informed the authorities, all 3 of the kids faced charges related to the death of Fawn. Nevertheless, a few months later, the charges were withdrawn due to the inconclusive results of a DNA test conducted on the individuals and compared with the DNA collected at the crime scene. People thought the 3 teenagers were responsible for Fawn's murder for years. Eventually, the case would get cold. When DNA from the crime scene was put into Cody's in 2000, no matches were discovered. Afterwards, the police collected DNA samples from the juvenile suspects who were first charged in the case and conducted follow-up interviews with them. The results unequivocally demonstrated that the DNA did not belong to any of the 3 people, contrary to the detectives' hopes that advances in DNA technology would connect the 3 to the crime. Considering that one of the suspects was discovered in possession of the Nintendo that had been taken from Fawn's home, this discovery seemed puzzling. Fawn's family lost hope that they would ever get closure as the years passed. Fawn's family became aware of genetic genealogy testing in 2018 and pushed for it. However, the police informed them that there wasn't enough money for this kind of testing. The department refused to let Fawn's family pay for the testing on their own, despite their offer. After working with the FBI to acquire money in 2020, the DNA found at the crime scene was eventually sent for analysis. The family got the much-needed response in a matter of weeks. Donald Cox Jr., the person who killed Fawn, was ultimately identified by the police on November 11, 2020. He was the older cousin of Fawn by around 5 years. He had been to the family's residence a number of times, so he knew the layout of the house as well as the schedule. Donald also had a criminal history that included possession of illicit narcotics and misdemeanor robbery. In 2006, he overdosed on drugs and died. The medical examiner had looked into the death because it seemed strange, and they had preserved a sample of Donald Cox's blood that helped connect him to the crime. Whether the 3 people who were arrested in 1989 were ever directly engaged is still up for debate. Fawn's family believes that Donald may have worked with the 3 youngsters to break into the house that evening rather than acting alone. But only Donald was responsible for Fawn's sexual assault and death. Some speculated that even though the 3 adolescents might have been in the house, it's possible they did not witness the murder. The family stated in a message on the podcast Bitter Endings that they just want to know the truth and do not want to bring charges against the 3 people. The family claimed that although this has brought them some comfort and closure, the explanations remain unsettling. Moving on to the next case. Isabella Guzman. 18-year-old Isabella Guzman killed her mother viciously in their Aurora, Colorado, home in August 2013. She gained notoriety online for her peculiar demeanor in court. Despite having mixed ancestry and Hispanic ancestry, Isabella Guzman was born in the U.S. in June 1995. Her biological parents, Robert Guzman and Yumi Hoy, were divorced. Therefore, she came from a troubled home. It was said that Isabella Guzman had behavioral problems from a young age. Because of this, when she was about 7 years old, her mother Yumi Hoy sent her to live with her biological father, Robert Guzman. Isabella Guzman finally returned to live with her mother, but during her adolescence, she remained unruly and rude, leading to her dropping out of school. By August 2013, when Guzman turned 18, things had quickly gotten worse between her and her mother. Guzman's stepfather, Ryan Hoy, said that she started acting disrespectfully and menacingly toward her mother. Although the exact cause of this is unknown, a source claims that Isabella Guzman's parents were unable to provide her with the kind of life she desired due to her bad upbringing, which is why she was often attacking her mother. Yumi Hoy hoped Isabella Guzman would comprehend the family's predicament when she reached adulthood. That does not seem to have happened, since Guzman and her mother got into a very heated altercation on Tuesday, August 27, 2013, which resulted in Guzman spitting in her mother's face. The following morning, Yumi Hoy's daughter sent her an email with the 3-letter phrase, "You will pay," in it. Hoy made the decision to call the police, afraid. That afternoon, they visited the home and had a conversation with Guzman. They informed her that if she didn't respect her and obey her mother's rules, she could be legally ejected. Hoy also called Guzman's biological father and pleaded with him to come talk to his daughter in an attempt to give Guzman more senses. That evening, Robert Guzman paid a visit to the home. In a subsequent interview, he stated that he had spent time in the backyard with his daughter, where they had enjoyed the scenery and the animals, while discussing the value of having respect for one's parents. Robert went on to say that he felt like he was making progress, but that, regrettably, their chat had accomplished nothing within hours. When Yumi Hoy got home from work on August 28, 2013, the night of the murder, she told her husband Ryan Hoy that she was heading upstairs to take a shower. But a few minutes later, Ryan Hoy was met with a terrifying scream and a loud thump. Then, as he heard a disturbance upstairs, he went to witness Isabella Guzman slamming the bathroom door shut. Guzman had locked the door and was pressing against it from the other side when he attempted to enter. He hurried back downstairs to dial 911 as soon as he noticed blood leaking out of the door. Ryan Hoy heard his wife exclaim, "Jehovah," and then he saw Isabella Guzman unlock the door and walk out with a bloodied knife, according to the Huffington Post. Guzman left the restroom without saying anything to Ryan. When she walked past Ryan Hoy, he said she was just looking straight ahead, as if she was in a trance. Ryan entered the restroom at the perfect moment to find Yoon Mi-hoi's nude body lying on the ground with a baseball bat next to her. There were reports that Yoon Mi-hoi's body was covered in stab wounds. Ryan tried to bring her back to life, but it was too late. She had passed away. It was eventually discovered by investigators that she had been stabbed at least 79 times in the head, neck, and chest, in addition to having her throat cut open. When the police came, Isabella Guzman had already made her quick escape from the crime site. A quest was started to find her, alerting the public about Guzman's hazardous and armed whereabouts. She was apprehended by police in the afternoon of the following day in a neighboring parking garage. Her mother's blood was still visible on her turquoise shorts and pink sports bra. After that, she was detained and placed under detention. Some sources claim that Isabella Guzman resisted leaving the four walls of her jail on the day of her scheduled arraignment hearing on September 5, 2013. But in the end, they pulled her outside. She was seen making strange and unsettling looks at the camera when she later appeared at the courthouse. She was pointing at her eyes, grinning. Isabella Guzman entered a not guilty by reason of insanity plea during the trial. In addition, a medical professional had attested that she had paranoid delusions, auditory and visual hallucinations, and schizophrenia for years. It was reported that Guzman was stabbing her mother without even realizing it. Rather, she believed that she had murdered Cecilia in an attempt to save the entire globe. Nonetheless, Guzman's plea of not guilty by reason of insanity was accepted by the judge. After that, she was taken to the Colorado Mental Health Institute in Pueblo, where she was told to remain until she posed no threat to the public or herself. Guzman was receiving treatment at a mental health facility when, in 2020, a number of TikTokers shared footage of her 2013 court appearance, catapulting her into the public eye. The background music for a few of her TikTok videos was a song titled "Sweet But Psycho." Some TikToker users could be seen trying to mimic Guzman's odd facial expressions in other videos. A video montage of her court appearance was seen over 2 million times. On the other hand, her online fan following grew rapidly. A few admirers remarked on her beauty and implied that she must have had a valid motive for killing her mother. In celebration of Guzman, people also began creating Facebook and Instagram fan pages. She stated in a petition for her release submitted to the court in November 2020 that she was no longer mentally ill and posed no threat to herself or others. All of this was happening at the same time. Guzman later admitted in an interview that she had suffered years of abuse at home from her parents. She clarified that she left and renounced the faith at the age of 14, and that her parents were Jehovah's Witnesses who frequently mistreated her. Isabella Guzman was allowed to leave the hospital in June 2021 in order to attend therapy sessions. She acknowledged that she had an abusive relationship with her mother, but she insisted that she would do it all over again if she could. How does everyone feel about Isabella Guzman? Please share your opinions with us in the comments section. Moving on to the next case. Jennifer Levin. Jennifer Levin, at 18, was intoxicated on August 25, 1986, when she went to Dorian's Red Hand, a pub close to Central Park, New York. Though it didn't seem like much at first, Jennifer had no idea that when she made the decision to end the evening and head home, a terrifying series of events would start. Around 6:15 in the morning on the next day, a woman riding a bicycle through Central Park was seen. She noticed something unusual just before she crossed the Museum of Metropolitan Art. Jennifer was laying behind the museum. She had left the bar a few hours before. It was apparent that there was a serious problem. Jennifer was half naked and had no breathing. Riley called 911 right after, and the police were then presented with a case that would soon make it onto every newspaper's main page. The police started their investigation right away, sending out teams to ask questions about any information they could find about this horrible incident in the neighborhood. Their investigations took them to the same place Jennifer had been that evening, Dorian's Red Hand. The first significant clue was discovered by the police inside this establishment. Investigators were notified by the bar-goers that Jennifer had not been by herself that evening. She had arrived there with a group of pals and departed with a man. Even though there were little specifics on the man, this knowledge turned out to be important. The authorities had no trouble piecing together the remaining pieces. The police got in touch with Jennifer's friends right once, and soon they had all the information they needed about what happened that night, including the identity of the enigmatic man. The man in question was a tall, attractive 19-year-old named Robert Chambers. Chambers was drinking beer alone himself at the tavern that fateful night. He looked unusually gloomy and disinterested in the bar's party scene. Chambers saw Jennifer at around 1 a.m, greeted her, and they gradually struck up a pleasant discussion. But his attractive 16-year-old girlfriend, Alex Cab, witnessed him conversing with Jennifer. Alex and Chambers had scheduled a date, but Chambers showed up more than an hour late and said nothing to her. Nevertheless, he was conversing with Jennifer. Chambers behaved very evasively when Alex confronted him. Furious, Alex informed him she didn't want to see him again, but all she received in return was a mocking laugh. This started what turned out to be a lengthy chat between Jennifer and Chambers. Jennifer and Chambers had dated casually before that evening. According to her acquaintances, Jennifer had long been attracted to Chambers and thought he was beautiful. Jennifer, who was eager to get closer to Chambers, sees an opening created by his argument with his girlfriend. Friends watched Jennifer conversing flirtatiously with Chambers in the bar for the next 3 hours. They departed together at about 4:30 in the morning. It was now time for Mr. Chambers to receive a visit from the police. All of this occurred on the same day, and the police arrived at Chambers' Manhattan home a few hours after the body was discovered. When asked about the marks on his face, he said they were caused by his cat. But after looking at the scratches, the cops weren't sure if they were actually caused by a cat. Upon inspecting the cat, they discovered that it had been declawed, which eliminated any possibility of it scratching him. Furthermore, there was a bite mark on his right index finger that did not appear to have been caused by a cat. But the most important thing was to learn more about the terrible tragedy before making any assumptions. However, Chambers flatly denied ever setting foot in the bar. His denial, though, would have no effect because he would soon find himself seated in the police station, with his claims about to significantly change. His story soon changed to paint himself as the victim after he acknowledged that he had actually been with Jennifer that evening. Chambers put it this way: Jennifer attempted to help him. Although he implied that she got somewhat assertive with him, there isn't any hard proof to support that claim. We'll also reveal to you why Jennifer's claims that she assaulted him were untrue by the end of the video. For now, though, let's examine the origin of the scrapes on Chambers' face. In the end, Chambers had to admit that Jennifer, not his cat, was the one with the cat. Furthermore, he disclosed to the authorities his actions when things became difficult. At first, his confession of hitting Jennifer and murdering her would seem to be extremely truthful, but there were a number of discrepancies in the facts that cast doubt on the veracity of his story. What had happened if all he had said was a lie? Jennifer's body was found with apparent injuries, indicating a violent altercation. She had noticeable bleeding near her throat, which suggested that she had been strangled. Following an autopsy, Dr. Maria Letzalandi determined that Jennifer's cause of death was strangling. Yet, Chambers persisted in telling his version of events. But the whole scene belied his claims. It wasn't just the injuries. Jennifer's clothes were pushed up, as the investigator indicated, suggesting that this was not a simple accident. Her unkempt look and clothes gave the impression that she had been abused. Even if there was ample proof that Chambers had done something heinous to Jennifer, it would be difficult to prove it in the absence of a confession. After 2 years and a considerable lapse in the inquiry, the much-anticipated trial took place. The trial of Chambers commenced on January 4, 1988. The main area of dispute in the court was the matter of strangulation. In his testimony on February 9, 1988, Dr. Alandi stated that the soft tissue around Jennifer's eyes had pinpoint hemorrhages that might be caused by constriction of the blood arteries in the neck. She explained that this showed that her neck was compressed, proving that she had been strangled. However, Chambers' lawyer Jack Littman said during cross-examination that Chambers may have put Jennifer in an armlock and strangled her, possibly killing her in a matter of seconds. Littman speculated that Jennifer may have jerked her head back and forth quickly in an attempt to catch her breath, leaving scratches on her neck. Although such a scenario may theoretically occur, Dr. Alandi admitted that it did not correspond with what transpired in Jennifer's instance. Following 9 days of trial without a verdict, Chambers and the prosecution agreed to a plea deal on March 25, 1998. Chambers accepted a sentence of 5 to 15 years after entering a guilty plea to first-degree manslaughter. He also had to admit, as part of the deal, that he meant to hurt Jennifer badly enough for her to die. In the end, Chambers received a 15-year prison term. Chambers served his entire sentence and was released from jail on February 14, 2003. But his eerie background was not going to disappear so quickly. He did appear to be overjoyed to be free once more. However, he was going to be surrounded by the unsolved questions from 17 years ago once more. In a 48-hour interview, Chambers gave a far more thorough account of events than he had disclosed before completing his time. He said they weren't completely naked, but the way she was discovered refuted his assertion, and the injuries on her neck suggested that she had been strangled rather than just struck. Thus, his account did not quite match the available data. At the moment, all he wanted to do was portray it as an accident while also expressing his regret. He continued to act like the helpless victim. In response to the question of why he chose not to call the police, he gave a straightforward response that, on its face, defies criticism. He said he cared, and that many people seemed to start believing his stories after he was eventually set free. But the perception of him among the public was about to shift. Chambers was free on bond when the footage that we just watched was taken. Girls were there at a home party in their panties, and Chambers seemed like he was having a great time. But even after 17 years, it seems like he was making up stories again. Additionally, Chambers stated that he remained there when the cops showed up. It could be questioned why Chambers wasn't questioned by the police right away. But the problem is that, to the police, he was just another park visitor at that time, and there was no clear indication of his possible connection to the case. He was just sitting off in the distance on a stone wall. The confusing thing is that he had to have continued to present himself as innocent even after realizing he was responsible for someone's death. His assertion that he was afraid and powerless to act was called into question by this contradiction, which he persisted in doing even after a long period of time. It was time for broadcaster Troy Roberts to bring up the pivotal moment in the narrative. Even after careful examination, the bruise that Chambers described as coming from being struck by someone looked very different from the strangulation marks, raising serious questions about whether the injury was actually caused. Chambers' hand even bore a bite mark, unmistakable proof that someone had bitten him. Even after doing his time, Chambers insisted he had no intention of killing her. He was guilty, he was sorry, he even apologized. The story was never able to come to the satisfying end it deserved, even though all the signs pointed to him killing Jennifer on purpose. It was hard for many to accept that his feelings were genuine. Chambers had made an effort to convey his fear and regret. Except his incarceration revealed nothing except an attitude problem in a man. In July 2005, Chambers was still facing legal issues from his horrific conduct in 1986, even after finishing his sentence. On August 29th, he was given a reduced sentence of 90 days in jail and a $200 fine for breaking his license, after entering a guilty plea to a misdemeanor narcotics allegation. On July 25, 2023, Chambers was released from the Chuan Gang Correctional Facility in New York, having completed 15 of his 19-year term. His parole period ends in 2028. What are your thoughts on this situation then? What transpired, in your opinion, on that fateful day? Why do you think Jennifer Levin was killed by Robert Chambers? Tell us what you think. We would adore hearing from you. Additionally, please feel free to leave recommendations in the comments section if you have any cases in mind that you'd like us to cover. Moving on to the next case. Jessica in Austin. On June 19, 2020, 4 TikToker teenagers discovered a dismembered body on Seattle's Alki Beach wrapped in a suitcase. It seemed that these teenagers were accidentally directed to the site by an American app called Randonautica, which is owned by Presley Media. Users can embark on impromptu trips using the app thanks to its precise location UI. Nobody knows where they are going or what they will find, not even the user. With just their location requested, users of this frightening random adventure software are guided to explore unknown locations. You can choose how far you can go from where you are right now, though. When these teenagers arrived at the beach, they noticed a black luggage on the rocky patch near the ocean. They initially believed it to be a bag of cash, but as they approached the luggage, they noticed an odd stench coming from it. They opened the luggage with a stick out of curiosity and found something inside that was sealed in a plastic bag. They decided to phone 911 to report a weird black suitcase with an unpleasant stench emanating from it because the scent was now pervasive. When police combed the Alki beach 2 hours after they arrived, they found human remains inside the luggage. In search of more hints, they closed off the beach. 3 days later, in the vicinity of the Seattle City Light Power Substation, in the 1000 block of West Marginal Place, the deputies found another suitcase containing human remains. The victims were identified as 27-year-old Austin Winter and 35-year-old Jessica Lewis by the King County Medical Examiner's Office. Both were discovered to have been shot dead. Austin was hit once in the torso, but Jessica died from several bullet wounds. Born in Maple Valley, Jessica's niece had worked at Laura's adult family home, an assisted living facility where she aided elderly and developmentally handicapped persons, according to Jessica's Aunt Gina. It was believed that Jessica possessed the poise and forbearance to accomplish that. Gina added that her niece was kind-hearted and eager to assist anyone in need. Jessica had 4 children of her own. 2 of her children were reported to have graduated from high school as of June 2020. The other was old enough to be aware of the developments, while the first was still enrolled in middle school. Austin, who was from Kent and lovingly called Cash, was also a native of Washington. The 8-year married pair had reportedly gone through tough times, but they had always been able to support one another. Austin's mother said of her son, "He had faith, a big heart, and loved the outdoors, country music, campfires, trucks, dogs, Jessica, and his family." His family wished to mourn their son in private at the time of his death. Following inquiries with the victim's relatives and acquaintances, the police learned that the couple was last observed at a residence on Burion's Ambaum Boulevard South. Michael Dudley owned the house, the police were informed. On August 19, 2020, a search warrant for Dudley's home was served in order to begin the investigation. In the room where Jessica and Austin had been living, investigators discovered spent bullets, bullet holes, bullet impacts, and a small smear of blood. According to reports, Dudley was unable to explain the bullet damage to investigators. In an effort to remove any traces of the incident, the room was reportedly recently painted and cleaned. Unfortunately for Dudley, forensics could see past the room's pristine appearance and found a smear of Austin's blood. Dudley was placed under arrest, so he could be questioned. Later, it was found that on June 9, 2020, Dudley and Jessica, who had been renting a room from him since December 2019 at his Burien house along Ambaum Road, got into a fight about their unpaid rent of $1,500 per month. Dudley acknowledged owning a gun and getting into a fight with them, but he denied killing them. Still, additional questioning of his neighbors resulted in his conviction. During questioning, a neighbor reported to the police that they heard shooting inside Dudley's house on June 9, 2020, and that they heard a guy yelling, "Please don't do this, just let me leave." According to the prosecution, Burien police officers went to the house that evening, but left after knocking on the door and receiving no response. Another witness who had recently moved into Dudley's home asserted that she came at the house after Jessica and Austin had been killed that same evening. She claimed to have seen the outline of a person with a broken arm protruding from beneath a pile of clothes. Austin and Jessica were staying in the room. The woman further informed the authorities that Dudley asked her to leave and return the following day so he could tidy up his mess. But she didn't come back for several days. Additionally, when Austin's father couldn't get through to Jessica or his son, he went to Dudley's house. Then Dudley told him that the pair was gone. Later, when Austin's father saw his son's clothes in the trash, he knew it was his. Gordon, Dudley's ex-girlfriend, described him as a violent person who had previously been arrested and charged for physically abusing her in 2016. Gordon was shocked that her boyfriend had perpetrated such a heinous murder. Additionally, in a court filing, his daughter, who goes by a different name today, said that Dudley sexually abused her for 9 years, from the age of 10 to the age of 18. She claimed that Dudley would make her watch while he viewed porn and masturbated, forcing her to share a bed with him. He would threaten to use a gun to kill her if she resisted. Dudley was a sicko who would occasionally smash the late victim's car so they couldn't escape, according to Jessica's Aunt Gina, who spoke with West Side Seattle. He allegedly installed trackers on people's vehicles. He would advise people to leave if he got into a fight with them, but he would also attempt to lock them inside the house. In order to frighten the victims, he once killed a dog in front of them and placed the corpse outside the house for 3 days. Because the dog had taken one of Dudley's chicks, he killed it with a hammer. He let the other dog sniff and look at it outside. Gina said that Dudley was an absolute crazy. She added that there had once been a dispute between Dudley and an electrician employee. Even after telling the man to go, Dudley would not allow him to. A 911 call was made after he threatened the man with a gun once more. Prosecutors claimed that Dudley shot both victims, butchered their bodies, and then packed the bones in a luggage that he dumped into various bodies of water. 10 days later, 3 teenagers were making TikTok videos on West Seattle's Alki Beach when they came across the suitcases containing human body parts. They documented their horrible discovery. However, TikTok came under fire for not taking down the explicit video as it quickly racked up 30 million views. Given that no footage of the victim's actual body was included, the social networking site argued that the video was not explicit enough to be taken down. However, the video was then taken down from TikTok or by the adolescent who uploaded it there after a few months. The haphazard way that Jessica and Austin's bodies were dissected originally sparked speculation about whether Dudley committed the act alone. After 2 years, Mike Dudley was convicted guilty of Austin Winter and Jessica Lewis's second-degree murders. Dudley will be sentenced on March 10, 2023, and his sentence may include a life sentence without the prospect of release. The deceased couple's families, who were present in court, applauded the guilty convictions and declared that justice had been done. Michael Dudley is no longer in the world, according to Charlene Creans, Austin's mother. That way, everybody may sleep soundly tonight. Austin and Jessica's souls should continue to rest in peace. Please share your prayer in the comments for the victims. Moving on to the next case. Christy Mirack. Christy and Mirack, a 25-year-old school teacher, shared a 3-bedroom townhouse in East Lampeter Township with a female flatmate. Christy awoke on December 21, 1992, and got ready for work. Her flatmate was off to work already. A man grabbed her and pushed her back inside her flat just as she was ready to leave. Harry Goodman, the principal of the school, called Christy's home at 9 in the morning after she failed to arrive, but nobody answered. A few minutes later, he tried to phone her again but received no response. Harry made the decision to check up on Christy because her house was close to the school. The door was ajar a little when Harry got at the residence. Christy was dead on the floor when he forced it open. She had suffered significant head and neck injuries, been sexually raped, and had been strangled by hands and clothing. He called the cops right away. Her time of death was established by the police to be between 7 a.m., when her flatmate typically went for work, and 7:45 a.m. Christy had been battered with an instrument that was found inside the residence, and there were no signs of forced entry. Semen samples were taken from the crime scene to gather DNA. Mirack likely knew her killer or opened the door expecting to meet someone else, according to investigators. An uneasy aura surrounded a married guy, 20 years her senior, who had surprised her the day following her death by bringing flowers to the primary school and claiming he was unaware of her passing. He was later cleared. but it turned out he was Christy Mirack's secret boyfriend. The hunt for Christy's murderer did not yield much in the years that followed her death. A public description of the suspect was made available. Authorities said they were searching for a man who was seen approaching Mirack's house after parking a medium-sized automobile across the street from her residence. They identified him as a white man with muscle who drove a white vehicle, either a Toyota, a 1993 Dodge Shadow convertible, or a 1999 Dodge Daytona ES. But no fresh leads turned up. After questioning more than 1,500 suspects, the police were unable to locate any leads. A little over 60 males were ruled out as suspects by forensic testing. In March 2017, 25 years after the case was closed, police made the decision to submit the semen samples discovered at the crime scene to Parabon Nanolabs, a business that specializes in DNA phenotyping, a technique that uses a person's DNA sequence to forecast their look. As of November 2017, Parabon had created rough drawings depicting the appearance of Christy's murderer at the ages of 25, 45, 55. The murderer was most likely 3/4 Caucasian and 1/4 Latino, with pale skin, brown or hazel eyes, and black or brown hair. These conclusions came from the laboratory. Despite the sketch being shared across Lancaster County, the authorities were unable to uncover any information on the murderer. Then, in 2018, Parabon uploaded the DNA sequence that was retrieved from the crime scene to the GEDmatch database, which matches DNA sequences to identify a person's potential ancestors and relatives. Investigators were told by Parabon in May 2018 that a highly significant match to the DNA sequence had been discovered on the GEDmatch database. The person whose DNA matched was probably the murderer of Christy Mirack's relative. Soon after, investigators focused in on 49-year-old Raymond Rowe, who would have been 24 years old in 1992 and resided only 4 miles from Christy's residence at the time of her murder. Rowe was a devoted churchgoer and a father who had been married 4 times. In addition, he was a local star in Lancaster County and a DJ at both big and small clubs. He had his own business, Freeze Entertainment, and was known by the moniker DJ Freeze. He also owned and operated a DJ equipment rental business and DJ school. Raymond Rowe was the DJ for a school dance in the area on May 31st. At the occasion, detectives went undercover. After the event, Rowe threw out a water bottle and a piece of chewing gum, which the investigators were able to recover. After being gathered, the objects were quickly sent to a state police crime lab for DNA analysis. Subsequently, it was discovered that the item's DNA matched the DNA discovered at the crime scene. Raymond Rowe was taken into custody and imprisoned on June 25, 2018. When Raymond Rowe did eventually come clean, he did not give an explanation for why he had slain, strangled, and raped Christy Mirack on December 21, 1992. Prosecutors have not either. Rowe entered a guilty plea to first-degree rape, burglary, and murder. He received a life sentence without the chance of release. Moving on to the next case. Morgan Taylor Lund. The Oshkosh Police Department received a panicked call on February 18, 2023, reporting an issue at the residence located in the 500 block of Jefferson Street. According to the caller, his sister had lost her mind and her former boyfriend had suffered serious injuries. One of the first officers on the scene, Officer Bennett, saw what looked like a scene out of a horror film. Morgan Taylor Lund, 22, was there, sobbing uncontrollably and trembling, as the blood-splattered mess of a house covered in blood covered everything. She had used a pair of scissors to stab her former partner 19 times not too long ago. Morgan appeared normal and in perfect health. Why, therefore, did she stab her former boyfriend in such a horrible way? What mysteries might lie behind those closed doors? There are few information available about when and where Morgan met her ex-boyfriend, whose name she never revealed, but they were thrilled to begin their life together. Their joy reached no limits as they brought their daughter into the world at the beginning of 2022. However, all altered on February 18, 2023, when their happiness was shattered and their lives drastically transformed. The first person to respond to the 911 call was Officer Bennett. A wave of shock overcame him as soon as he entered the house and got to the top of the stairs. The upper chamber had become a macabre scene due to the blood splattered throughout and total disarray. Everything about the house seemed out of order, suggesting the seriousness of whatever had happened within. He spotted a girl. She was blonde. She was clad only in a large blue UCLA sweatshirt as she stood there. He was drawn to her, nevertheless, by the unsettling sight of blood all over her hands, feet, arms, and front and back. She was completely absorbed in a shirtless man as she leaned over the back of a black sofa in the living room. She applied firm pressure on his shoulder and chest, as if in a last-ditch effort to assist him. They didn't take long to get the seriously hurt man immediate medical attention. Then, focusing on Morgan, they walked over to her to see how she was doing and to find out what had happened. Morgan was shaken and troubled. She appeared completely broken and perplexed by what had just occurred, the officer noted. She was wailing and sobbing and pleading for help. As one policeman attempted to calm her down and encourage her to speak, another went up to her brother, Ethan, in an attempt to put together what had happened. Ethan heard the loud noises and knew something wasn't right when he eventually opened his door. At that moment, he discovered Morgan's former partner lying on top of her, both covered in blood. Even though he was making a valiant effort to hold her back, Morgan continued stabbing at him as if she were under some sort of evil enchantment. It was a terrifying scene, rife with confusion and terror. In order to determine whether Morgan was motivated to commit such a horrible deed by outside forces, the officer had to question her. They may use this knowledge to help them frame their questions during Morgan's interview and handle the case more skillfully. The officer spoke with Ethan, but he wasn't able to supply them any information, so they again focused on Morgan, the only person who could really explain what had transpired that morning, and the reason behind her attack on her former boyfriend was her. She revealed information to them that was startling and unpleasant. Morgan recalled that when she awoke that morning at roughly 6:30 a.m., her infant was soundly asleep in the room next to her. She tried to go back to sleep, but it was impossible, and she was left tossing and turning in anger. Nothing seemed to help her fall asleep, despite her best efforts. Morgan moved her tiny one to a large playpen in the living room since she was so afraid of waking up her. Her former partner was also present, sound asleep on the sofa. She reasoned that he could watch the infant while she attempted to get a little more rest. But this is when the interesting part begins. After then, Morgan said, she didn't recall ever waking up again. She claimed that going to sleep was the last memory she had of the mayhem that had broken out. This implied a lapse in her recollection prior to and during the violent episode, giving the narrative an enigmatic new turn. The officer became suspicious as he listened to Morgan's account. Was she attempting to present herself as innocent, or was she genuinely telling the truth? He considered the theory of forgetfulness, in which a person forgets recent experiences, but there was something wrong with his explanation and Morgan's behavior. He made the decision to confront her head-on to find out if she had been under the influence of drugs. Morgan's next revelation startled everyone. It was not a usual incident. Rather, it was extraordinary. Even though it's uncommon, anyone could experience it for a variety of reasons, such as dealing with challenging circumstances or trauma from the past. Morgan acknowledged that she had been dealing with mental health issues and hallucinations. She also claimed to have felt as though she was seeing an enigmatic person everywhere and had even experienced moments of being out of her body. It was as though fantasy and reality merged into one unsettling story. Morgan revealed that she had been plagued by the presence of a dark, unnatural figure for the previous 6 months to a year. It didn't speak to her or offer instructions, but she could hear unsettling voices coming from it. She was terrified just looking at this strange person, and it was exactly what had happened to her this morning when the shadow seemed to come to life, trapping her in her own terrifying thoughts. Morgan claimed that her recollection was completely jumbled, as if she was attempting to recall a dream or an unreal occurrence. Though it was all blurry, she believed she heard her ex-boyfriend ranting at their daughter. It's similar to when you can't quite distinguish reality from a bizarre dream when you wake up from it. She recalled finding herself in the living room and witnessing her ex-boyfriend being attacked by a terrible black creature perched on him. She ran to the couch and picked up a pair of scissors that were lying next to it out of worry because she didn't know how to aid him. Instinctively, she attempted to protect her former partner by using the scissors on the shadowy, menacing apparition. Morgan didn't realize until her ex-boyfriend retaliated and yelled at her, attempting to wake her up from what she believed to be a horrifying dream. It dawned on her that the person she was attacking wasn't some unreal enemy. In reality, it was her ex-boyfriend, and her daughter was watching the entire affair. Shocked beyond belief, Morgan dropped the scissors and rushed to help her ex-boyfriend, pressing on his chest to stop the bleeding. She was startled and confused when she realized what she had done. Although Morgan's story sounded credible, the cops couldn't decide between the two possibilities. One suggested that her behavior would make perfect sense if she genuinely had an undiagnosed disorder. The other notion, which was more sinister, put out the possibility that she was abusing the alleged disease as a justification for not being punished for the attack. Her real goal in this case might have been to hurt or possibly murder her former partner. Thus, after hearing the entire account and Morgan's version of events, the officers informed her that she was being placed under arrest and would need to report to the police station. She begged them to tell her what would happen to her next as she started to cry. The attack had already rattled her. She was even more terrified by the prospect of getting arrested. Concerning her daughter, she wondered if she would ever see her again. Morgan sobbed and begged her father to assist her as the police led her to the squad car. She believed that since he was aware of the problems she had been having, he could help her understand the circumstances and offer an explanation for what had occurred. After Morgan was placed in handcuffs and transported to the police station, her brother Ethan was in an interview room, giving written accounts of the tumultuous relationship between Morgan and her former partner. Their existence was not as idyllic and pleasant as it appeared on the outside. Ethan revealed that Morgan's connection with her former lover was difficult. Her former partner even asserted that Morgan had struck him several times and caused him bodily injury. Morgan and her former lover shared a home and had a child together, but their relationship was everything but happy. They would often dispute about insignificant matters, to the extent that he would just become silent and withdraw from her during their disagreements. Their relationship eventually came to an end, and 1 or 2 months prior to the stabbing incident, they had made the decision to break up. Additionally, Ethan disclosed to the police that Morgan had been struggling with depression, particularly in the year following the birth of her now 11-month-old child. The cops began to question whether Morgan's mental health issues stemmed from their breakup and whether the stabbing was a retaliatory act after learning this information. They were attempting to make sense of the relationship between the awful events that had transpired and Morgan's personal struggles. After the Ethan interview, Morgan was placed in an interrogation room. First, the officer informed her of her legal rights and read her the Miranda warnings. Morgan replied by asking the investigator if it would be better for her to have legal representation before or after questioning. Again, Morgan asked the investigator to speak with her father. Her father comforted her over the phone to not panic and to maintain her composure. She should be calm and have faith in him, he said, as he genuinely believed she was innocent. 30 minutes felt like an eternity while Morgan waited for her father to arrive. Upon his arrival, he disclosed the real reason behind Morgan's behavior. He informed the police that Morgan was suffering from postpartum depression and that, so far, nothing this severe had happened to her while she battled this illness. Some people develop postpartum depression, a particular kind of depression following childbirth. It may be difficult for them to care for both themselves and their child, and it can cause them to feel depressed, nervous, and overwhelmed. Postpartum depression made Morgan feel even more anxious and depressed than she already was. It might have caused her feelings and ideas to become disorganized, which might have had an unforeseen impact on her behavior and contributed to the development of the dark character's visions. Following the interview, Morgan spoke with her father, and the two of them agreed that they would not speak with the investigators again unless they were accompanied by legal counsel. They desired the support of a dependable advisor to ensure that everything was done correctly and to defend their rights. Morgan's ex-boyfriend surprisingly survived despite having 19 stab wounds across his body, including his back, right shoulder, chest, face, and hands. He said that although Morgan had previously acted violently and abusively, nothing had happened between them on the night of the event. Additionally, he said that as far as he knew, she had never threatened to murder him. Morgan was accused by the police of attempting to kill her ex-boyfriend in the first degree after stabbing him 19 times while he was asleep. However, Morgan entered a not guilty plea in August 2023 citing mental illness. Later, she took the plea offer to lower her charges, explaining that her actions were driven by her mental state. She entered a no-contest plea to second-degree recklessly endangering safety and aggravated battery with the intent to cause grave bodily harm in place of the original charges. Consequently, on November 3, 2023, she was sentenced to 7 years and 6 months in jail. She will also be subject to 5 years of extended supervision in addition to the aggravated violence charge. She will then be subject to an additional 5 years of probation for second-degree recklessly endangering public safety. She is presently incarcerated serving her sentence. The intricacies of mental health concerns and their interaction with the legal system are clarified by Morgan's case. Her plea of not guilty by reason of mental illness emphasizes the significance of addressing mental health issues within our culture, even though her acts had serious consequences. Questions remain as she completes her prison sentence. How can we better recognize and assist those who are experiencing mental health problems before they get so serious that catastrophic events occur? Furthermore, what adjustments to the legal system may be made to ensure that individuals with mental illness receive equitable treatment and favorable results in criminal cases? Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing cold cases with us. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cold Case Mystique for more deep dives into unsolved mysteries. Your support helps us bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like us to cover next. See you in the next video, and remember, the search for truth never stops.